Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another show, for another episode of our Tactical Breakdown series, the show in which we look at the players in an analytical and statistical way, making comparisons, showing graphics, showing you the key information that you need to understand and get more educated about certain players, certain systems, how players play in different positions, and what players might be coming into the Arsenal and what impact they could have on the team moving into next season and the upcoming seasons. Hopefully they're staying with us for as long as feasibly possible. And of course for today, as the news about Nicolas Pepe increases and the intensity of the likelihood that he will be becoming an Arsenal player increases as well, which is absolutely fantastic news, I thought it'd be a really good opportunity to take a look at what he actually provides for us, not just in terms of goals, because we've talked about goals, we've talked about how much attacking flair and technical skill that he has, but it's important to understand how he actually adds to the team in more of a defensive sense. In yesterday's show, in which we did a raw reaction to the news that Pepe would be having a medical at the club this week, some people in the comments were being slightly negative about it, saying that it doesn't actually provide that much defensive cover. And so I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into that fact and that theory and see how much credence there is to it, make some comparisons between players that we already have playing in that position, and if we're actually going to be losing out in any sort of defensive capacity with Pepe on the right. But if you are enjoying the series, of course, please give it a like, please subscribe, please leave your comments in the comment section below. They're always great. I read through as many of them as feasibly possible and reply to them as many of them as feasibly possible. So keep those comments coming in, and if you turn those notifications on, you'll be notified when we go live. So like in yesterday's show when we went live, people were able to join in the live chat, ask questions, get their thoughts across, get their names and their thoughts read out on the show, which is always a pleasure to do. So if you want to get involved, please subscribe and click that little notification bell so you always get notified on your smartphone, tablet, whatever, when the show goes live and when these recorded ones go live, and I'll post it as well, so you don't want to miss out on a thing. But let's get straight into things and talk about how Nicolas Pepe occupies that right wing slot for Lille and how he's made himself into not only an offensive player that provides a lot of goals and technical skill, but someone who covers the right back as well. So if we first of all take their heat maps into account, we're going to look at the player which he compares to in the Arsenal side most, and that is Henrik Mkhitaryan. Now you might think, why would I be talking about that? Well, Mkhitaryan played 22 games at right wing for Arsenal last season, more than any other player, so it's important to see what type of defensive cover the Armenian provided us and the type of work rate that we got from him, so we can then see what we'd be gaining from Nicolas Pepe. Arsenal overall don't have that many out-and-out right wingers. Mkhitaryan isn't necessarily an out-and-out right winger, although he did play there in a really fantastic season for Borussia Dortmund, but he is more, as most people will tell you, more of a central player, more of an attacking midfielder, and so therefore playing on the right, he is going to be slightly lacking in terms of what he's really capable of. But he played there, and he played there to an ability which actually got a lot of criticism from Arsenal fans, but he did do quite a lot of stuff well, and has shown in pre-season what he is about, and the productivity and the creativity and the goal-scoring threat that he can actually provide in pre-season. So it'll be interesting to see how he evolves into next season, especially with the incoming Nicolas Pepe. So let's look at the heat maps of the two players first of all on the screen now. You can clearly see there that Pepe's is much more intense. That comes from not only playing a lot more games on the right than Henrik Mkhitaryan, and these heat maps are specifically taken from the games that both of them played, or the minutes that they played on that right flank. Pepe, you can see very clearly how he likes to cut inside when he moves forward. But for this video, we're focusing particularly on the areas that are being covered in their own half. You can see the intensity for Pepe in his own half is greater than that for Mkhitaryan, which is interesting. Now, Lille had a fantastic season last year in the Liga. They are more of the most attacking teams in the league. Obviously, they've got some fantastic forward players, and Pepe obviously being one of them, as well as their striker, Leao, who's obviously off to AC Milan this summer as well. Made a lot of money, have Lille. But Pepe did a lot to come back. You can see that with the intensity. His intensity map comes back further than what Mkhitaryan's does. The intensity is broader as well, so he's doing more of that work. But it's going to be interesting when we get into some of the stats how that still differs, how Mkhitaryan does still come out on top and a lot of those defensive stats. Speaking of which, let's get those on the screen for you now. So you can see there Mkhitaryan's right wing defensive stats on the top of your screen and Pepe's at the bottom. Now, if we talk about defensive duels, so these are the situations in which players get into challenges, trying to win the ball back from an opposition player, and you can clearly see that there is an increase in the amount of Mkhitaryan's defensive duels that he gets involved with compared to Nicolas Pepe. Just over 6 defensive duels per game from that right wing position, whereas just over half of the amount we see with Nicolas Pepe. Now, just over half from someone who we know is a very offensive player, is an out-and-out winger rather than an attacking midfielder, I don't think is too bad. If it was in the 1s or the 2s bracket, that would be concerning for me. But the fact that he is up there with at least 3 defensive duels per game and winning 53% of those, which is a really good account, which was more than Wilfried Zaha when we looked at him. And if you want to get the comparison between Pepe and Wilfried Zaha, you can go check out that video, which is on the channel. But a 58.8% success rate for Mkhitaryan. So maybe it's something that gets understated in the Armenian, that actually he does a lot of good defensive work. And when we talked about the lineups, which you can also go check out that video, I didn't really include Mkhitaryan too much in the lineups, but maybe he is someone that I've underrated, someone that actually in terms of defensive skills could come on when we're leading a game and need to hold on to that position and hold on to that scoreline, who could come on and do a really good job in that position. In terms of aerial duels, this is where the Ivorian winger definitely takes the biscuit. Just over 2 aerial duels per game, winning 41% of those. So he's getting involved in more of those. Whilst Mkhitaryan does win more at 45%, it is 0.36 or 0. Well, it's about 4.2 less than what the Ivorian does in terms of the frequency of those. But it's key the fact that we know that Pepe is more of a well-built, taller player, and so therefore he's winning a lot more of those headers. Sliding tackles, whilst Pepe does less, he actually wins a third of the sliding tackles that he gets involved, whereas Mkhitaryan does do a few, but he's never won a single one in terms of the ones that he got involved with last season. Interceptions, though, the Armenian takes this one, very impressive, just over 4 interceptions per game, whereas Pepe's down there at 1.72. Now, it's going to be you'll be able to link that in to another statistic which I'm going to mention, which is the recoveries, and the reason why Pepe's recoveries might seem to be a little bit less, or not quite a lot less, more than half are less than what Mkhitaryan's is because the recoveries, as you can see, 5.56 for Mkhitaryan, 2.6 for Pepe, but the key statistic to look at here is the positioning of the players when they win the ball back. Mkhitaryan 47.6% won in the opposition half, whereas Pepe's 65.9% were won in the opposition half. Now that's a really, really nice statistic. You know, when we did the old tactical breakdowns where we looked through these stats, and I always mention how recoveries for a winger are something that you really need to take advantage of. And whilst he's only doing 2.6 per game, which is average for a lot of players, which could be a lot better still, 65.9% of those being in the opposition half is great. It means that you can get on the opposition much, much faster in terms of your counter-attacking play, and he's very aware. And we're going to look at some of the graphics in a bit, and you can see where he's doing that to the best of his ability. If we look at losses then, in terms of how many times they lose the ball, 10.75 for Mkhitaryan, 11.48 for Pepe. But again, it's the percentage about where on the pitch it's happening. So 28.6% of Mkhitaryan's losses are in his own half, which isn't great. Just under a third of his losses are in his own half, putting the team under pressure, which can be really frustrating for fans, whereas only 18.2% of Pepe's losses actually occur in his own half, which is a much, much better return from how much he holds on to the ball. So that's really the statistics. You can't really talk about the discipline because they're still very similar. The amount of fouls, I mean, Mkhitaryan fouls a lot more than what Pepe does, but it's not so much as to draw too many more yellow cards. Clearances, Mkhitaryan does do that a bit more, but Pepe likes to take the ball out. He doesn't really clear the ball because he doesn't like to do that. He likes to carry the ball forwards, and that's what you can see from the dribbling stats. If you want to see his dribbling and attacking stats and his passing stats, go watch the video and the comparison with Wilfried Zaha, and you can see them all there. So let's get into some of the graphics there and talk about what we can actually see in those games. So you can see from the first one on your screen now, where you've got the opposition, which is this is in the African Cup of Nations, where you've got Morocco attacking Ivory Coast there. Pepe's closing down the player, making the pass, the possible pass, a lot more less likely that it's going to take place. Intercept that, make a challenge, win the ball, and he does that really well to close players down. You can see that in another example here, where you've got Lille playing Nimes, and where Nimes have then played the ball across the box. Pepe has instinctively got in the way of that cross, got into the right position. He's way further back than you can see some of the other players in the pitch there, and he's winning the ball and getting it away and clearing it away to take the pressure off Lille. If we then move forward to talking about what he's done there against Toulouse, again, we've got a Toulouse winger on the ball on the left-hand side of the field. Pepe has realised that his teammate needs help. He's come on and pressured this guy, and not only that, but he wins the ball as well, which is really key. So he's getting in the way of passes, winning the ball back, and doing his job as a winger, which is great. You don't want to see a lazy winger not getting back and not doing his job. I mentioned that his aerial duels are a really big part of his game, and that definitely comes into the next couple of graphics you're going to see. In terms of corners, Pepe is in the box, and Pepe does win those headers. He's not only in the opposition half to score goals, but he's in his own half to get the ball away. When we had Olivier Giroud, we knew his heading ability was great, and that also happened in our own box. And there was countless times where Olivier Giroud got the ball away, and so Pepe can also deliver that for us as well. And finally, if we have a look at something else, going back a little bit, not in terms of the box, but a cross or a cross-field ball that's come in there, you can see Pepe's identified where the ball's about to come across. He intercepts that moving into the space and gets his head on the ball to take away the danger as best he can. I think that's a really good place to sort of end things. I think I've shown you a wide array of different scenarios where Nicolas Pepe is actually doing his defensive work very well. Yes, he's not doing as frequently as what Mkhitaryan is, and that's down to positional play and the type of player that they are. But I think what you gain in offensive sense from Pepe definitely makes up for the slight decrease in what you take away from his defensive side of his game compared to Mkhitaryan. And then you're also providing yourself with a different option. If we're in a position in a game where we need to hold on to a lead, maybe Pepe's the one you take off to bring Mkhitaryan on for the defensive adding to his game, that you can provide that team, give them a bit of extra cover. And I think that's really important for the team. I hope you've really enjoyed this show. If you have, please give it a like, please subscribe if you're new around here with those notifications turned on. I'll see you again this afternoon, most likely for another Raw reaction show, in which you'll definitely want to turn those notifications on so you can join us in our live chat. But as always, enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you again very, very soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.